Yes, quite.
Coming in.
The stream is live. How exciting is that?
Mm.
Well, I've got some ferociously difficult questions for you, Penny.
Dread what he's going to be asking me, but this is very odd for me, you understand, because it's always me running this, but now
Exactly.
running this.
Exactly. So, is Rose going to tell us when we should start for real?
Just go.
Should we just start?
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, good morning and welcome to the Penny Ferguson interview. Goodness me. It is my great pleasure to introduce everybody who's listening to Penny. Of course, most of you, I'm sure all of you, will know Penny, either directly or certainly by reputation. But Penny is, of course, the creator and the driving force behind the Living Leader program, which, in my view, is the best leadership development program out there. And I've been on many, but this one is the one that works and matters, as I'm sure everybody listening will agree. And I imagine also that everyone listening to this interview will have been on the program or will have been impacted by it, and will have been through some sort of either transformational, perhaps even life-changing experience as a result of being through the program, which is your creation, which is something really special. And so I know that everybody listening, and I can tell from the questions that I've received in advance, everyone is very keen to hear what you have to say in answer to the enormously difficult questions that we have. But also, I know that everybody owes you a huge debt of gratitude for coming up with the program in the first place. I mean, I first went on the program, I think it was over 25 years ago. And I remember attending the program somewhat under duress, because I thought to myself, I was a busy chap, as you will understand. I was a very important CEO running an enormously important business, I thought. And I had no time for these pesky leadership development program things. What on earth was it going to teach me? And you spotted me immediately as somebody who was showing a distinct lack of interest and probably extreme indifference to the whole program. And you set about a mission to sort me out, which you did in style. And I remember 2 days later, as many people on this program, on this interview, I should say, will also remember, after 2 days, my mind was whirling. I was at the same time inspired and energized and liberated, but in equal measure, I was nervous and terrified about what lay ahead. But what I knew was that I was going to take responsibility for my life, and I was going to choose a different path from the one that had gone before. And that was enormously important to me. It was indeed life-changing for me. So look, Penny, enough about me and all the rest of it. This is all about you. Tell us, where did it all start? What was the, what was the catalyst for the program? And when did you think that it might have a bit of potential, actually?
Well, even that I find really difficult to answer. I don't actually know where it really started. I think that, as you know, 32 years ago, when I was 50, is when my life was in free fall. Having just come out of my third marriage, not knowing what I wanted to do. And I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And it was kind of interesting because all the things that I was attempting to do, completely different from anything I do now, was helping me find more what I didn't want to do. One of the things that I found really interesting that gave me probably one of the biggest insights was when I qualified as a hypnotherapist. And I remember somebody coming to see me who'd got a problem with flying. They were terrified of flying. And I did one session with them, and within 6 months, she'd become an air hostess. So I called that a success. But what I didn't like was I could take it through. It happened to be called the swish technique. I was doing it for them. And what I began to think was, that's not what I want to be doing. I want to help people do it for themselves. And that gave me a different perspective. And it was combined with the fact that Dennis, my last husband, everybody used to leave his program saying, utterly amazing, best program I've ever done. Didn't matter if it was a 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, or how many days it was. And I suppose I really put him on a bit of a pedestal, thinking, gosh, how amazing to have everybody feel like that. But I used to go and meet the clients 3 to 6 months later, and sometimes their bosses as well. And I'd ask loads and loads of questions, trying to find out what they'd taken away from the program. And I got really depressed when I realized that they'd at best forgotten 80% of it within 6 weeks. And that really was best. But what was even more challenging was I kept asking questions, trying to find out what behaviors had changed. And honest to God, I couldn't identify any behavior change. And to me, that was, well, it just didn't fit with my values, because it meant that the company was spending a lot of money to send people on a program where they were getting lots of interesting knowledge. They were having a great time, really enjoying it. But if you learn something and don't do anything different, then the client's just wasting the money. And that I couldn't get my head around. So that was when I thought there has to be a different way. And honest to God, where the program came from, I have no idea. It was literally taking things that I'd learned over the years that were personal. It was taking some of the things that I learned observing Dennis, but thinking there has to be a different way of putting this together. And realizing that it was about all of life, not just work, where you've got to remember to go in and pick up the skills toolkit to say, oops, it's work now, here's the skills toolkit. But in all honesty, Paul, the thing that when I look back, and it's much easier when you're looking back, as you know, I did the first program where I lived at the time at home, tiny little group, and it was only Annabelle Parahia, who was head of all development training for Sun Microsystems, who said that first 2 days has just changed my life, run programs for Sun. And it was only when I started delivering the programs that I realized I hadn't understood leadership. I didn't understand. I'd heard it. I'd got it in my head because I'd heard Dennis talk about it. I'd heard other people talk about it. But in all honesty, I only started understanding leadership in that first year of delivering the program. That was the first time that it went from head to heart. And I began to, as you might phrase it, I began to get it. And it was only delivering the program. So you could say that it was the program that by accident I designed that changed me and really got me to understand leadership. So I'm very glad you didn't come on my program in the first year, because I was still at the learning stage. So it's as though, and I'm sorry if this sounds a bit odd, you probably heard me say it before, it's almost as though somebody up there helped me put that program together and said, this is what you're here for in this lifetime. Now get off your butt, go out there and deliver it and work it out as you go along. Because that's literally how it came about. And I reckon it was probably as much as 3 to 4 years before I really and truly understood every bit of what I was teaching. That's when it really went into heart. And I realized, my God, this is part of every minute of every day of your life. That's what leadership is.
Yeah. Well, wow. I mean, if you look at the program in overall terms, Penny, I mean, because there's an enormous amount of content. This may be an unfair question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. There's an enormous amount of content. For some people, certainly for me, it was almost overwhelming. Which is why I've been on the program about 6 or 7 times, and I'm still learning. I must be one of your best customers. But is there a module, or which is the module, which is the section that has the most impact on people, do you think? Which of the modules is the moment where it suddenly goes bang and resonates?
This I do find impossible to answer. You've got to remember, Paul, I've never attended my program. So it's kind of difficult. All I can do is find how it is for others. I do think, and this is the obvious one, and there's one that's less obvious, but the one that is more obvious, I'd say, is the communication and understanding that what's coming out of our mouth is not how we think we're coming across.
Yeah.
A lot of people come in and their leadership's in their heart. What comes out of their mouth is straightforward management and the way it links through everything. So that is the fairly obvious one that gives people a, oh my God, wake up call. And when they have the second meeting and realize that changing the communicating behavior, even that little bit, takes a real conscious effort, do they then beginning to say, oh my God? And because that's so key, it impacts how you are as a parent, a friend, a colleague, a boss, an employee. It doesn't matter. So that's the obvious one. But to me, the less obvious one, but the one that personally had the biggest impact on me, is give get.
Yeah.
That for me just changed my life when I got it, because I had, nobody ever believed this, but I had a desperately bad confidence problem. When I first designed this program, I've got to be honest, I don't think I could have even attended it, let alone deliver it. And when I did the first program, I would have been sweating, my voice would have been shaking, everything. And it was only when I got the real wake up call, when I was going to do a presentation, thinking it was going to be to 4 people and found out it was 40. And I nearly had a nervous breakdown, that somebody who I used to have a lot of conversations with about the meaning of life came down with me. And I remember him saying to me on the way down, how are you feeling about tonight? And I said, I'm in a terrible state. I'm so worried. And I came up with all this stuff about, I was going to be sweating. My voice would be shaking. People wouldn't understand what I was talking about. I'd forget what I need, all of this stuff. And I came up with so much stuff. And I'll never forget what he said to me when he just looked at me and said, why are you thinking about you? And that was when I realized that every time I had a confidence problem, I was thinking about what would people think about me? Would I do a good job? Would I be okay? Would they think it was wonderful? All of this stuff I was thinking about get. And the more you really deep down think about it, the more you begin to recognize you don't actually have control over get. Even when you think about, how do I get the best from my team? How do I get my boss to listen to me? How do I get, you don't have control over it. And it's just shifting to think differently. Okay, if I knew there's 1 or 2 things I could give to my team that enable them to outperform anything they believe they've ever done before, what would I choose to give them? If I knew there's something I could give to my boss to enable him to listen to me even more than he can, what would I choose to give? And it's all the time recognizing give, not get. So that, for me personally, now, I don't know what's true for everybody else. A lot of people say something different. Yes, quite a few people begin to get the impact of give get, but I'm not always sure that you get that on the first time you hear it. And you could probably tell me that better. I'm not sure that you hear that the first time you experience the program. Whether people who now do the virtual program, which is spread over time, they have more time to absorb, I don't know.
Mm. Yeah.
So I find it difficult, but for me, the obvious one is communication. Once you link it to everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree. I think that's probably how I would take out of the program as well. I think communication behaviors is normally a massive revelation to everybody. That by and large, the way we've been communicating at work and at home has been appalling, and bound to end in only one result, which is disharmony. And then we're surprised when that happens. So that's a huge learning. And I also agree. Give get is it's slightly more subtle, but then it's actually not subtle at all, and it's very liberating, because when you suddenly realize, actually, I can declutter all this nonsense in my head, which is worrying about this, that, and the other that's going to happen to me. Actually, that's irrelevant. All I need to do is focus on one thing, which is, how can I be the best I can be for others? It is such a liberating thought. One question I've got, I mean, for me, the biggest part of the program, I think that continues to make a real impact on me, and I utilize all the time, is what I call the trilogy of tools to use in order to create a different thinking environment. And everybody knows on the call that those three things are the power of appreciation, which is always underrated and we never do enough. It is the immense power of listening properly, and of course, it is the technique of utilizing what I think you call incisive questions. And I mean, I use those three techniques all the time. Every day of my life, you'll be pleased to hear, I use those techniques all the time. And I use them for a reason, because it is very easy for all businesses and all families, frankly, to stay in the vortex of the prisoner trap that we inhabit, and we never get out of it. And the same old, same old, same old. And so using ways in which to break out of that prisoner trap and to find new ways to do stuff and new customers to engage and new suppliers with whom to have better contracts and to address our people issues and so on. All of those things are hugely important. Of the three, I mean, appreciation and listening, when you have them explained to you, are pretty obvious, and you think to yourself, my God, has it taken me this long to work out that actually these are good ideas and they will create a different thinking environment? The one that's more tricky, I think, for most people who've been on the program, is incisive questions. And I just wondered whether because you use them all the time as well, I know, and you're, of course, extremely proficient at it and very good at it. You've asked a fair number of incisive questions at me, where you've been trying to turn limiting assumptions I've got in my head upside down. But are there any tips for those on the call? Because I'll betcha that a lot of people listening, they know incisive questions is a tool they should be using, but they're a little bit nervous about how to use it or what tips there might be to make it work in practice.
There's no question they are not necessarily easy. I think it's a case of almost getting your brain to flip in a different way. I learnt them, God, it is about 30 years ago. I could not get them in the beginning. I just could not get them at all. I was struggling. The only way that I managed to start getting my head around them was I had a notebook that went with me everywhere. And in the early days, it was with my children, because, of course, as you know, I hadn't worked in a business, so I didn't have a team or people I could do it with. But believe me, my children pushed and stretched me in every way possible. And I already knew that I was much too overexcited about giving advice all the time, which I had to stop. And every time that I had a discussion with one of my children, or every time I knew that they were going to tell me something, because they'd come in and say, Mum, can I talk to you about something? I'd know there'd be something that was going to trigger me in one of my charming responses of, what the bloody hell do you think you're doing, or whatever. So I had this notebook, and after every time I was with them and had a session, I'd come out and I'd ask myself a question along the lines of, okay, so if I knew that meeting or that one-on-one could have gone better if I'd asked good questions, what questions might I have asked? And then in the beginning, I would always have them start with, if you knew that, because then I knew it was likely to be incisive, not just how, what, where, how, when, which is where we typically go. And of course, how, what, I don't want anybody to hear that how, what, where, why, when are not important. They are. But if you ask that too often, they're going to keep going down the same route in the brain again, so it doesn't get anywhere new. So I would ask myself that question, and then I would write down any questions that came into my head, and I'd write them down. And I got a notebook that was full of incisive questions until bit by bit, and I'm sorry if this sounds a long time, I reckon it took me a year before I became good at them, because it was constantly reminding myself of how I could ask a question with, if you knew that. When I then did start getting better at it, I felt that sense of elation. That question worked. Well, a hell of a lot of them that didn't, because I'd probably hit the wrong assumption, or it had come out of nowhere and they didn't know what the hell I was asking them. So I made a lot of mistakes on the way through. But writing down those incisive questions, and because what I also did, I didn't just write them down, I'd then read them out loud. So what I was doing was I was bringing all of me, if you like, into being. So kinesthetic, I designed the question. Visual, I could then read it. Auditory, I could then hear it. So all the time I was doing what I could to help embed it in the brain. And it's really funny. I can still remember this was not me. He was chief constable of Bedfordshire Police at the time, and he phoned me one day and he went, "Pen, I got the right incisive question in the right moment." He was so excited. And he said, and it worked. But it was
Fantastic.
comical. But I don't know about you. They took me a long time. Yeah, now, okay, I can trip them off all the time. But what it takes that effort to get the brain to flip until it becomes second nature.
Yeah, it absolutely does. It's one of the most powerful techniques, I think. And I mean, people who work with me know full well when it's happening, because of course I use "if you knew that." So they roll their eyes and go, "Oh my God, here we go." But of course, it doesn't matter, actually. The fact that everybody knows what I'm doing and what they're supposed to be doing in equal measure, which is to start to unearth and turn over an assumption and to stop that blocked thinking and to see if there's a different way in which to resolve a particular issue. It doesn't matter, because it's a tool, it's a technique, and it's really powerful. It's amazing how much innovation and creativity has flowed from that simple technique in my career. Anyway, it's been absolutely amazing. That's a great tip, actually, to write them down and to practice out loud. I think is a really good way of doing it. But for all those people out there who are nervous and twitchy about starting incisive questions, don't be. Just give it a go, because the benefits of becoming practiced at it, and it does take time, but the benefits are huge. I've got a question from one of the attendees here, Penny. How would you describe the golden thread that runs through the program? Or was this not obvious to you at the outset? So I know how I would answer that question, but how would you answer that question, Penny? What's the golden thread that runs through the program?
God, yes, I do find that quite a difficult one to answer. I believe that the golden thread starts at the very beginning. It's one of the things that I always remember. Chris used to say this to me, Chris Weston, in the very beginning, that to build a team, the first thing you have to have is trust.
Yeah.
And so that very first session that we do, which is call it what you like, the introduction session, getting people to share who they are. Even when you can get a group of complete strangers in the room and they share who they are, not just what they do, but who they are, I think that thread is created then, because you see even a group of 10 strangers, by the time that's finished, you've got a team. You've got a team that trusts, and they then work together. So for me, that is where the golden thread starts. And I believe that we've managed to create the golden thread by everything that we learn on the program links to something else. So when you look at how you choose to think, when you look at understanding responsibility at a very different level, when you look at communication, that comes into everything we look at. So all the time. But having built from the very beginning that, call it a team, because it almost is a team, and you see people come together. I mean, even it's been staggering for me how we've had some supposed teams come in. They're not a team. They're a bunch of people who work together. They're not a team. and seeing that shift and how quickly it shifts. So for me, I don't know how else to describe it. That's what starts the golden thread. And then getting people to understand that everything links to everything. But I'd be really interested to know, Paul, how you would answer that.
I mean, I completely agree. The opening session is it's very unsettling, actually, because you are not at all prepared for what's about to happen. In fact, you're not even prepared for what you're going to say. I mean, it just sort of comes bursting out of you, and you think, what on earth am I doing talking about this really quite personal stuff in front of people I've never met before? But that's the whole point. That's the whole point. The point is that you have this character, this deep-rooted set of things about you that you can table. And once you've tabled them, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent, you engender trust. You build relationship immediately. It's amazing how powerful that is. So I think that is a very important trigger. I think you've mentioned the word. For me, the golden thread is the notion of truly understanding responsibility. I think many people use the word and don't get it at all, in all walks of life. And if you really do take responsibility for who you are, then it's okay to put yourself out there on the table and, all the rest of it. If you truly take responsibility for who you are, then you make better choices. You will stay more authentic. You will be a better version of yourself. It may not appeal to everybody, but you will be at least true. And in truth lies exactly what followers are looking for in a leader. What they don't want is flim-flam and superficiality and cosmetics and lashings or far too much persona. What they're after is understanding who it is I'm working with, who am I working for. And leaders who truly take responsibility, without even realizing they're doing it, create an aura around them which people love to buy into. And when you see it working, it's wonderful. But it starts from that simple notion: I am going to take responsibility for my life. And things will be different from here on in. And I choose a different path. Those things, as they're easy to say, they're very, very difficult to do, but they are immensely powerful. And I find that the thread that runs through the program.
Wow, I found that amazing. Let me just ask you, because I, you know me, I find it very difficult not to ask you a question. How do you get your children, because you've got 4 children, how do you get them to begin to understand that?
By trying, don't use the word try, not in front of Penny Ferguson. She'll have you hung up in the rafters. By setting an example, by talking through the logic of it, by listening, by appreciating, by asking really great, incisive questions. And the other thing that I do is I posit 2 alternatives. Here's an alternative where you just knee-jerk your way through life, expecting this and that to happen and all the rest of it. And here's the other alternative, which is that you actually shape your destiny, which feels better. And having a discussion about it. We've talked about it often. There is a bit of eye rolling from time to time when I say, are we really taking responsibility? But that's to be expected from one's children. So it is, it's through explaining it and understanding it. I don't think you can just say, take responsibility for your life. In fact, that's one of the whole points of that first communication exercise, which is so unraveling for so many of us. The point is, you can't just get it straight away. You need to learn what it really means to take responsibility for your life. And that's why I think it's the thread that runs through the whole program. There are different ways, different angles, different perspectives on that simple truth, which is that if you choose to take responsibility, actually your life becomes a whole lot happier, easier, and better, not just for you, but for those around you. So that's how I would say it. But you're not supposed to be asking me questions. I'm supposed to be asking you questions. So another one from an attendee, Penny, is how much has the program evolved over time? Or is it the same as you first conceived it?
Basically, it's the same as I first conceived it. And we've had so many discussions with clients and with other people, do we need to change it? And it's always a resounding no. There is one bit that we did change. And I think it's the absolutely right thing that we did. What we used to do on day 2 was do what we called a thinking partnership. I can't remember. Did we do it when you did the program?
No.
We didn't. Okay. So we used to do a demonstration of a thinking partnership, how you could enable somebody to think something through for themselves without doing what we normally do, which is giving advice because we care and we want to help them. We decided to stop that. The reason being that people were very nervous about doing it, very nervous about doing it. It was one thing getting them to do it in pairs when we were there and they could ask, how do we do this? How do we put those questions together? How, and they didn't find it easy. And we discovered between days 2 and 3 that very rarely were they actually then doing it because they were too nervous they would get it wrong. And so we said, okay, this is not useful. We need to do things that it's really going to be able to move forward. So that's when we brought in the exercise about beliefs and behaviors.
Yeah.
Find out what it is, what do you think the beliefs are in your organization? What are the behaviors you're seeing and so on? And we found that hugely more powerful. And people could go away with, this is what we can do differently without fear. And actually, some of our trainers will say that for them is the most powerful bit of the program.
Yeah.
When people suddenly go, oh my God, I am demonstrating behaviors that would cause people to believe something that just isn't true. Doesn't matter how much I tell them it's different. My behaviors don't support it. And so that became much more useful, much more powerful, and could be looked at individually and could be looked at as a company-wide or team-wide or group-wide. So that's what we did change. Now, other than that, the program hasn't changed. Do we deliver it differently? No question it's delivered more powerfully than it was when I first started doing it, because I was learning as I did it. And you get so many different groups, you get so many different questions, so many different challenges, and that helps us learn as we do it. All of our trainers will say every program they deliver is different, and some of them have delivered 80 programs, not insignificant amount. And they will still say every program is different. And of course, the language would change if we're delivering to young people. So 16 to 18-year-olds, we're going to be using different language. The learning is absolutely the same. The examples and how you get it across is different. But other than that, no, in all honesty, the program's the same.
That's fantastic. It's fascinating. I must say that evolution to beliefs and behaviors was a really important part, because I think I agree with what many of your trainers would say. That's another moment in the program when I think the penny drops big time. In fact, it's amazing how many people think they understand what the difference is between beliefs and behaviors, but don't. and struggle with coming up with examples of what would be the ideal behaviors in an organization, and keep on getting beliefs and behaviors mixed up. But once you've got it sorted in your head, and you recognize in practice that actually your behaviors, principally your communication behaviors, but not just your communication behaviors, your behaviors in general are going to have an enormous influence on the beliefs that others have about you, about the organization, about what's going on, about what we care about, what the values really are in the organization, not the ones that are up on posters, but the ones that actually truly really exist. Once you realize that, it makes you take responsibility much more seriously for your own behavior, because it matters immensely. Fascinating. So this is a sort of connected question. The program's been going for a long time. We won't say how long, a long time. And some might argue that some of the content is getting a bit dated, right? Because, I mean, you know, some of the Rackham stuff dates from, I don't know, 60s, 70s, but and here we are in the middle 2020s. But I think everybody would say that the program is still incredibly relevant. I mean, we know that from the feedback that we get. So why do you think, in the age of social media and the Internet of Things and AI and all the rest of it, why is the program still as relevant as it was when you started out all those years ago?
Again, not an easy one to answer because I've never been on my program. However, this is what I think. By luck, by whatever it is that occurred, I believe that part of the reason that the program works the way it does is it's not just about head and knowledge. Somehow it's created, I don't know, it goes from head to heart. People don't leave the end of day 2, saying, I want to do different. They're saying, I want to be different. So it's gone from head to heart. Now, all I believe that we'd be doing if we change the models is saying, oh, well, we need to be more up to date. Is it going to have a greater impact? I always say to people when sometimes they look at the models as if, oh my God, they open the workbook first. Oh my God, we've done this years ago. We don't know it. The reality is, and I can still remember, this is going back quite a few years, when we took this through a police force. Now, in those days, they sent policemen to Bram's Hill for 3 weeks, 6 weeks, even 12 weeks at a time. They may have spent 2 days on McGregor. They may have spent 2 days on Hertzberg or whatever the heck it was. And of course, they came on the program and you could see them open the book and they'd go, oh God. And you could see them thinking, we're going to have to do this again. And the feedback we got every single time, without exception, was, that's the first time this model's made sense to us. We've spent 15 minutes on it. They may have spent 2 days on it. And what it was doing was that it was appealing to their intellect, so they'd get it, but they believed that what they were doing was the right thing anyway. When you then combine it and link it with everything else, it's suddenly, whoa, actually, it's coming back to the same thing. I might be a leader in my heart. What's coming out of my mouth is straightforward management. Yeah. So why would we, and believe me, Paul, we've had these discussions so many times with the trainers, with clients. Do we need to change it? They say, no, what's the point? It's not about the models. It's the way you're linking them and the messages that come from them. So yes, we do very occasionally, and I mean twice a year, maybe somebody says, oh, these models are a bit old. Maybe we need to update them.
Yeah.
2 people out of the hundreds that go through hasn't convinced me by any stretch of the imagination that we need to do something different. I mean, if somebody came to me and said, we really do need to, but we get a feedback. In some ways, the feedback we get on the programs now is more amazing than it's ever been. But that's because all of our trainers are becoming more and more skilled with how they really come from heart and deal with the questions that come up.
Look, I completely agree. I think it's very easy to change a winning formula and think you're doing the right thing, but you could very easily destroy it. My own take is that, because I think it's a great question. My own take is that in this crazy world where everything is so fast and immediate and accessible, and you're you're attacked from all sides with all kinds of media and apps and information and stuff, quite a lot of which is fake. But anyway, yeah, it's actually more important than ever that you give your own mind, your brain, time to think, and not just to get subsumed into the noise that's attacking you from all sides. And that's why I think it's still got relevance, because this notion of taking time, of reflecting, of thinking, of putting a gap between all the stimuli that we get and what we ultimately choose to do as a consequence, or choose to be as a consequence, is more important than ever. It is. Remember what I was saying earlier about thinking differently. I think that's one of the most important things that any business faces as a challenge. How do we think differently about this problem? Well, all the noise that comes at us from all parts of social media and AI, and they're giving us solutions to everything all the time, and we have no chance ourselves to take responsibility and think for ourselves. So I think those tools are more important than ever, which is why I think they are as relevant and will be relevant in 50 years, when neither you nor I will be bothering anybody with however we stream an interview in those days, but it'll still be just as relevant then. What is this? Is another question from someone else. What's the biggest impact you've heard the program have on someone else? Can you think of a story about the biggest impact it's had? I'm sure you can think of many.
Well, this is a bit odd, really. I remember Sherilyn, the lovely Sherilyn.
Yeah.
She had somebody who worked for her, and this was a bit of a whoa. And he was doing a good job for her. He was part of her team. And after doing the program, he left and bought and opened a post office, which was a bit, and she said that actually it was a shock. But she said, I'm actually very happy for him, because he's actually decided to choose to do something he really wanted to do. Now, that for me is hugely powerful.
Yeah.
Wow. There are little things that maybe aren't so little, but I know always just blow my socks off when somebody comes back on day 3 and says something that makes me go, oh, wow. And this was, I think it was a managing director who'd been a bit, came on the program, what the hell am I doing here? What am I doing here? What have I been sent here? At the end of day 2, thinking, shit, I needed to be here. And he came back on day 3. He said, I really don't understand it. He said, I told you on my introduction that I'm tired a lot of the time because I've got a little 2-year-old who sits on the naughty step about 2 or 3 times a night. He's an absolute handful. He said, since I've been on this program, in the last 3 weeks, he sat on the naughty step twice.
Wow.
And that's where it's so wonderful. You're able to look at him and say, that tells you all you need, that leadership isn't about changing other people. Leadership's about changing you. So you get, and that's little things you get. I can still remember somebody, and I'm thinking, God, I'm not sure I can share this, but he came back and he said, I just want to thank you. He said, I came on the program and he said, I did something I knew I should have done years ago. I left my wife. I thought, oh, hang on a minute. But, and he said, he actually came back to us about a year later. He said, we are both so much happier. We stayed together for all the wrong reasons. And suddenly waking up to quote your words, take responsibility for my life. Because he said, I wasn't doing it. I just wasn't doing it. And if that's what means somebody turns their life around to do something that's right for them, and in this case, utterly right for the other person, how amazing. We've had some people who've come back and said, I wouldn't have got that promotion because I wouldn't have had the courage to put myself forward.
Sorry.
That's all right.
That's the problem with the live stream. Sorry, all noises going on.
Don't worry. But having suddenly woken up to say, it's me who's holding myself back. And I put myself forward, and guess what? I got the job. I wouldn't have put myself forward if I hadn't done the program. To me, that's amazing, and I love it. And there's lots of things, but those for me are the ones that spring to mind.
That's absolutely brilliant. What makes you truly happy, Penny? When do
Doing
you
what
reach
I
true
doing what
happiness?
doing what I do right now. You know, it's so lovely. This will give you an example of just very recent last week. As you know, we're the leadership faculty for the Marketing Academy. So we take the 30 scholars through 2 days compressed version. Sherilyn does the day 3 with them sort of spread over the year. But we had it last week, 3 of our trainers, Glenn, Susie and Dave, they did the 3 groups of 10. And I went up at the end to speak to them all at the end of the 2 days. And to go in there to talk to them, of course, they're really kind of excited when they know that I'm coming in to talk to them, because they know I designed the program. And I love the bit where I invariably, when I do this, I say, okay, have you enjoyed your 2 days? And they're absolutely flying high and say, incredible. And I say, so who had the best trainer? And they all go like this. And it's so lovely to see that. And then I talk to them for about, I suppose, 40 minutes to an hour, something like that. And I am truly happy when I see them sitting there utterly energized by what they can do differently, how they can make their lives better, how they can, take responsibility for their life and behave differently. That gives me such a buzz. I love it with a passion. So that makes me really happy. And in my personal life, I mean, you had your phone go off. I'm very lucky that we haven't had a dog bark. The other place I'm truly happy is at home with my dogs. I only have 3 at the moment, and 2 of them are quite young. And the one who's now just 2, in 6 months' time, I will be and have probably found a husband for her. So there'll be puppies. And Bella, who will be 2 a bit later, 6 months later, I will find a husband for her to have puppies. So that gives me immense pleasure. I know that if Emma's watching this, my lovely managing director and younger daughter, she'll be saying, oh God, Mum, please don't keep any puppies. But she will be with a forlorn hope, knowing that there will probably one be kept from each litter. The challenge will be only keeping one. But
I love
so
that.
that makes me really happy. And living where I live, I'm very happy here. So for me, I have literally the perfect life. I'm very lucky.
That's a very good answer. A very good answer. So let's talk about the future for the program. I mean, what is your vision for it going forward? How would you describe it for those who are interested to know?
I have a big vision, and God knows if I'll achieve it in my lifetime, but I hope Emma will continue it. The biggest vision, I would give anything to be able to have this as part of the school curriculum, that every child, before they leave school, has the opportunity to learn these lessons, to begin to understand, truly understand about taking responsibility for their life and what they could do. Now we are beginning to get into schools. And I'm actually going up there, I think it's next week, into a education trust where they've got a lot of schools, and already they've got a trainer in there. They've got another new trainer just trained up. They're taking all the heads through from the schools, and it's having a really interesting impact. They're also doing some programs for the young people, and they're loving it and really saying it's making a difference. But how we get it into schools, that would be my God, if I could achieve that, but that would be a legacy beyond anything. But I have a feeling the only way we're probably going to get it in there would be to take, God help us, I'd be picking up the phone to you for this one. We need to take a group of probably 10 MPs through, who've got influence in that way. So there's no way I'd be running that program. I'd be picking up the phone to you to say, Paul, how do you feel about it? But, you know, the only way we're going to do it is get MPs to understand and be able to recognise that if they could get this into schools, what a legacy for a government to leave.
That's great. I love that. I love that. I love that vision. That's brilliant. So I'm conscious we have 10 minutes, and I know people will have busy diaries. So I'm just trying to look through the rest of the questions. I say it's a good one here. One of the observations that we hear quite frequently from those who've been on the program is that it's fantastic. They love it. It's wonderful. But they find it hard to keep it going and or to remember everything. What's your advice to people who are saying, "Oh, yeah, I know I'm reverting to type." How do they keep it fresh? How do you keep it fresh?
It really depends here whether it's one person who's done it in a company and nobody else has done it, or whether they've had a team go through, or if they've been on, again, an open program, and so they've only had a few people in their company go through whatever. I think it's really important to build links with people who've already been through the program. So if they're only one person in a company and they've been through an open program, then jolly well keep the links with the people in that group. And what they need to do is make that group work for itself. So put messages on it where they've done something where they've really screwed up and said, guys, so they ask a question, if you knew that I could have handled this better, what are your thoughts about it? Or whatever. Or they just share it and say, God, I came out of that meeting knowing that I'd, been interrupting all the time. I wasn't really listening to people because I kept looking for the moment where I could get my idea in, and all of this, whatever. The more you can build those links, the more that's going to help you. No question. It isn't easy doing it on your own because you get sucked back into the organizational jelly. And I would say that where I think it's really important, and there's a few, you are definitely one of them. You, Chris Weston, Andrew Cannon, CEOs who've done the program several times and take it in wherever you've been. This is where anybody in that company is lucky, really, really lucky, because the leadership culture starts from the top. And you used to go in and deliver a program when you went into a new company, sometimes 2, sometimes 3. You didn't do very many, you didn't need to, but you nearly always delivered to the lowest level, basically saying, guys, this is the culture here. You now have permission to give me feedback when I'm getting it wrong. So when you're in that environment, it's actually really quite easy because that is flowing through the company. People pick it up and they come up with silly things. I know I've had some people say, well, that's not a very Penny way of handling it. Well, that's not a very living leader way. So people do sort of remember, which is great. But if you're on your own or there's only a small amount of you, you need to take responsibility for saying, how can I create a group around me who I can talk to, who I can, if you like, share concerns with, who I can have conversations with, who I know are going to listen to me, that'll help trigger me. Again, it comes down to responsibility. You choose whether you hold on to it or whether you don't. You choose whether you find people around you who can help you, who can in some ways mentor you. And you do your damnedest to live the life and talk the talk and walk the walk, so that in your area, in your team, you can be seen to be making a difference. And if you can be seen to be making a difference, then other people in other bits of the company are going to start to say, hang on a minute, what are they doing? And you do your damnedest to get more people to go through the program and understand what you're endeavoring to achieve. So I don't know if you've got any thoughts that you can add to on this, Paul.
Well, I think those are all great ideas, great tips. There are some things that I do. And it depends on your own style, I suppose. But from a communication behavior perspective, to keep myself honest, I actually use the Rackham terms all the time.
Okay.
So I will say in a meeting, let me summarize where I think we've got to on the debate so far. Or if I could just test my understanding, and I do it very deliberately, could I just bring you into the conversation? I did that yesterday. And the reason I do it is because if I don't do it, I am sort of royal blue through and through. And if I'm not careful, I'll be proposing, giving information and disagreeing until the cows come home. So I use those words to trigger in my head all the time the balance between management and leadership, manager mode, leader mode. So that's one thing that I do, and you can do that all the time. You can do that all day, every day. And that, for me, that keeps it fresh every day. The other thing that I do, again, for those teams of people who are listening, who've been on the program as a team, I always leave, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes at the end of every one-to-one, a chance to discuss communication behaviors or beliefs behaviors or theory X, theory Y, or appreciation or listening or something that is related to the program. And in that way, they all know it matters to me, and of course it keeps it fresh as a result. So those are two techniques I'd suggest. Last question, Penny, you'll be relieved to hear. If there was one thing that you wanted people to take from the program, what would it be? If it was the one thing, or you can have more than one if you like, but if there was one thing, what would it be?
To focus on, we use the word appreciation, to look for people's strengths, to look for what people do well and tell them. It is the most powerful thing that I know. All of us know we're getting it wrong. We wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever, and we worry about it. And nearly always then, if we go to work, that's what the person, our boss, will see, what you're doing wrong, because they want to give advice as to how to put it right. And what they're doing is putting their attention on behavior you don't want. There is nothing stronger to modify somebody's behavior than focus on their strengths. And it's an example I always give. If you've got a boss who doesn't listen to you, the temptation is to say to the boss, you're not listening to me. And I don't care if they're right or wrong, you will feel defensive. And they'll go, yes, well, I was. And they'll quote the last sentence back at you, or something that irritates the hell out of you, but doesn't say they were really listening. That's not a useful way to modify behavior, because you're putting attention on what you don't want. Wait till by accident they listen to you. It doesn't matter why. They maybe have had a heavy day. They may have had lots of meetings and now they've got time and they listen. That's what you leap on. And so I just want to say, do you know, it meant a lot to me when you listened to me like that. I could really feel that your attention with me, you got better quality thinking from me. And I'm really, really grateful. And thank you for that. It meant a lot to me. And that feels nice. So they say, I need to do that next time. So for me, really looking for what people do well and tell them. Don't ever hear me say you ignore bad behavior. That's not what I'm saying.
No.
But really look for what people do well and tell them. I look back on how I brought up my children. I told them every day I loved them. They knew I loved them. Did I say when they remembered to pick up their coat when they came back from school rather than drop it on the floor? No, I didn't. I didn't notice it. Or if I did notice it, I didn't bother to point it out and say thank you. So I think there's so much. And the more you can make it about the individual, about what it is you value about that person that they're doing right now, rather than just the task, the more power it has. So to me, that would be the one thing that I'd say, if you could do, that can have a profound impact and change your life.
I couldn't agree more. That's a perfect way in which to end the session. Thank you, Penny. As ever, truly fascinating. I've learned loads of things, as I always do whenever I talk to you. So thank you. I'm sure everybody else has enjoyed it too. But for now, we'll end it there and let everyone get on with their days.
Thank you, Paul. I've enjoyed it.